In a so-called free state, officials and stakeholders concoct solutions to problems often created by other bureaucrats and with little regard for infringements on the people. These stories are born at the apex of freedom and entrepreneurship. We foolishly advocate for the taxpayer. Brian's Beat presents Freedom Fools.
Caught me with my papers down, pants up, thankfully. Big show for you today. Last one for a few weeks. Hope you're ready. Freedom Fools, Saturday on WBSM. Yes, I am. I've just to reiterate what I just said in case you didn't quite get it. I am going to be heading out of Dodge after today's show. Well, no, it's not after today's show, but this is the last Saturday show, not only for the month of May, but my next Saturday show is not scheduled until the, even I have to think about that. 28th, June 28th. I'll be heading out of pocket. I'll be doing Brian's Beat all next week, and then taking a flight out of Massachusetts for a few weeks. You know, a little vacay, little wedding type stuff. You know that. You know the stuff that you have to do. As you know, this is Freedom Fools. On this show, I love to delve into what people are doing in order to create their own freedom. Hopefully their freedom does not interfere with your freedom. Sometimes it does. But I think most of the time there is a perception that it does. Well, we'll find out. Coming up in just a bit, we're going to talk to Andy Pollock. Andy is the president of South Coast LGBTQ Plus Network. Pride Month starts tomorrow. We're not talking about a bunch of lions. Pride Month starts tomorrow. All kinds of people looking for freedom. Later on this hour, in fact, in about 10 minutes or so, we're going to talk to Tara DeSisto. Tara, she's a remarkable woman. And she right now works with a couple of PACs. And she is also trying to bring her branch of freedom to us, some of which I am down with. Others I have a question mark. I'm not saying no to, but I have a question mark about. At any rate, we will be talking about ranked choice voting. You may recall a few years ago, Massachusetts voters went to the polls. I think it was 2020. And I voted against ranked choice voting that year. If it comes up in 2026, I might have a change of heart. At least I think it's worth talking about and without the pressure of this is a ballot question. It might become one, but I think I would prefer that you listen to it with an open ear. Because one thing's for sure, if you live in the city of New Bedford, if you live in the town of Dartmouth or Fairhaven or Acushnet, any of the surrounding communities, your community might decide that you want ranked choice voting. On this, the 31st day of May, it is National Autonomous Vehicle Day. And I can tell you a couple of shows next week, at least one show next week, we are going to be talking about artificial intelligence and how it seems to be slowly, maybe to some people, quickly taking over. Autonomous Vehicle Day is today. And I would like to ask you, would you be willing to be a passenger in a driverless vehicle? My hand is up. I'm willing to give it a shot. I'm not willing to use my debit card to pay for it. Somebody else will pay for it. I'll do the ride. It's also National Meditation Day. National Meditation Day. You know, a lot more people meditate now than, let's say, at the turn of the century. More people are getting into meditation. I think transcendental, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, transcendental meditation seems to be the big one out there, but there are different variety. Have you ever tried meditating? Does it work? It is also World No Tobacco Day. In other words, don't chew it, don't smoke it. World No Tobacco Day. Now, considering I've already seen a couple of people drive by the window, walk by the window, with butts in hand and in mouth, I guess they don't know it's World No Tobacco Day, but it is World No Tobacco Day. On this date in 1977, the transatlantic pipeline, you know, the pipeline that went from Alaska down to the lower 48, the transatlantic pipeline was completed. And as Donald Trump would say, drill, baby, drill. There were some football players that I knew back in the mid to late 1970s. I guess you could work back in those days. You just couldn't have it associated with the school. And so what the school would do, the boosters, they would work out some kind of deal with the folks dealing with the pipeline. And you'd have these big behemoth football players going on drilling, digging, shoveling to keep up their body mass on the pipeline. Back in those days, instead of trying to build body mass, becoming bigger, which they were doing anyway, they would do that type of work to become stronger. Anyway, 1977, the pipeline was completed, and pretty soon we started getting some oil from up there. And then not too much longer after that, some oil from up there started to spill. Remember the Exxon Valdez incident? The Bryans-B quote of the day. Sometimes, if you want to see a change for the better, you have to take things into your own hands. Make my day. Sometimes, if you want to see a change for the better, you have to take things into your own hands. Clint Eastwood. I'm not exactly sure when he came up with that quote, but I can guess there was a time, mid-1980s, and I know this all too well, mid-1980s, Clint Eastwood was troubled with the happenings in his town where he lived, Carmel, California. And he got so upset, water was a problem, and there were other problems. I know you would find it hard to believe Carmel and problems, but in his world, there were problems. And so his way of trying to rectify the problem was to run for mayor of Carmel. Now, here's a guy, take you back to the 1970s. So you're talking 40, let's say 45 to play it safe. He's 93 now. So a guy who was in his acting prime and becoming a director, owned a radio station. You know that Play Misty for Me radio station? Clint used to own that radio station. He was also the owner of the Hog's Breath Inn and owner of the Mission Ranch, just to name a few things. Look, the guy had money and he had people to operate these things, but he was the type of guy, sometimes if you want to see a change for the better, you have to take things into your own hands. He ran for mayor and he won. And you can take it from me, I interviewed him a couple of times, even watched him play golf once. He was a damn good mayor. Now, I'm getting ready to, we're going to get into our first guest of the day. But before I go down that particular road, I want to throw this out to you. I don't want you to answer it right now. I do not want you to answer it right now. Well, if you have the WBSM app, you can use App Chat to answer this question right now. The Trump administration identifies the Commonwealth of Massachusetts as a sanctuary state. Governor Healy and other members of the Bacon Hill delegation say we are not a sanctuary state. In your opinion, is Massachusetts a sanctuary state? Okay, I want you to answer that question later on after our guest, unless you want to use App Chat, of which you can answer on App Chat. Anyway, when we come back, Tara DeSisto is going to join us, talk to us about rank choice voting. Yeah, we all want the freedom, or we say we want freedom, but are you really willing to fight for it? Welcome back to Freedom Fools on WBSM. Brian with you on a Saturday afternoon. I was at a convention a couple of weeks ago. In fact, it'll be 2 weeks tomorrow. And one of the speakers at the convention was talking to us about rank choice voting and also about many things dealing with libertarianism, what had been going on nationally with the Libertarian Party and trying to translate that to the local aspects of the party. In fact, Tara DeSisto talked me into going and getting on the state board of the Libertarian Party, at that time known as the Libertarian Association of Massachusetts. That name has since changed. But at any rate, Tara and I have kept in touch with each other. And I did not know this until recently, let's say over the past couple of weeks, that she is on the advisory board of the Rank Vote. And Tara's going to talk to us about that today on Freedom Fools. Tara, good afternoon. Welcome to
Hi.
Freedom Fools.
Hi, how are you, Brian?
I am fine. Are you a freedom fool?
I'm a bit of a freedom fool.
A bit? I think you're one of the bigger ones.
Oh, I've been known to be a rabble rouser here and there. I like to do it in a way that's constructive, though, and not destructive.
I think I'll save for exactly how you go about doing that for another time. But no, I get it. Look, there is I'm going to use a Trumpism here, if you don't mind. A lot of the changes that Donald Trump has been making, I'm kind of okay with. I'm just not okay with the way he's doing it.
It's been interesting to watch it play out as the courts have gone up against him and challenged him, and there's a new conflict between him and the Federalist Society lately, which is really interesting because the Federalists are such strict constitutionalists. I think we are a almost 250-year-old democracy, and there is a lot to preserve. Personally, I think that preservation of freedom and enactment of freedom for individuals is surgical procedure and not necessarily a demolition job. So I have some concerns about how things are happening. Due process is an important one.
You think? It's number 4, number 5. It kind of helps to protect number 1 and number 2 as I look at amendments.
Some people can't get past 1 and 2, and due process really keeps the government from criminalizing all of us. It is what keeps us safe, and the courts are the last place of refuge for citizens when they are attacked by the government, and we can't just be, collecting people without due process and disappearing them. That's not
smash and grab and all kinds of things. Let's get into this whole thing dealing with ranked choice voting. I said it earlier, 2020, I wasn't down with the program. I listened to you talk about it the other day, 2 weeks ago, and I'm not going to say that you have convinced me, but you convinced me enough that I think that I would like people that listen to this show and the knowing how much of a freedom fool that you are, maybe you can convince me and some others about this whole thing dealing with ranked choice voting. So first and foremost, exactly what is it?
Well, I just do want to give you a little bit of context about my background. So I was the National Director of Development for the Libertarian Party and really got to understand the challenges that independent candidates face when trying to challenge the two-party system. There's not a lot of wiggle room there. In fact, Jo Jorgensen in 2020, she made the ballot in all 50 states and unfortunately was not eligible for the debate stage. And no press would give her any attention, which as a senior advisor on that campaign was really eye-opening to me to really understand the barriers that candidates face. We are really tied in this country right now to this duopoly, and it's created this atmosphere of pendulum politics where we're constantly shifting from one extreme to the next to try to make up and recover from damage done from each administration, whether it be in the states or at the national level.
All right. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I know the Jo Jorgensen story. But how would we do that in the gubernatorial race? They've been, this state is heavily Democrat, and let me just say you are a fourth generation Bostonian. So,
I am.
But this state is heavily Democrat. Your family, I believe, was a part of that party at one particular time. You've been a Democrat. You've been a Republican. You've been a Libertarian. I think you're unenrolled now.
I have worked across the spectrum of partisanship, and I continue to work with different independent candidates and different parties, including the Forward Party, to try to create a more just system of governance that is less extreme. I really have tried to find what can work best for the population. And here in Massachusetts, it's very interesting because when Charlie Baker was governor, he turned out about 60% of the electoral vote. The same year that Elizabeth Warren turned out 60% of the vote. And so there's some overlap that exists in our population in regards to partisanship. Also, 60%, that same number, identify themselves as unenrolled and don't want to be associated with a party. And so more and more, especially as the campaigns and candidates get more extreme. People don't want to be associated with a particular party. But what you have left is the primary system where the most extreme candidates are the ones selected to pursue public office.
I was going to say, most people are unenrolled, but they still vote in this state heavily Democrat. So what is that really telling us? They say they don't want to align with the party, but they still vote for that party.
It says to me that the unions in our state really have deep, deep, deep roots in our political system. That's what it says to me.
Okay, that stated, how does ranked choice voting remedy or change that?
So ranked choice voting allows candidates to run without being condemned as a spoiler. Ranked choice voting allows for individuals who are thinking outside the box to be able to take on the idea that we don't need to be a one-party state, or we don't need to be to work within the duopoly constructs. What happens in ranked choice voting is you decide who your first choice is, who your second choice is, and as many candidates that are on the ballot, you can rank those as necessary, as you're desired. You don't have to rank every single candidate. You can choose to leave candidates off as candidates you don't want to select. But what happens with ranked choice voting is it allows for the nuance to exist. I speak a lot about the gray space of liberty and how the two-party system wants to make every issue an us versus them or a black and white issue. And that's not how solutions are found. Solutions are really found in the gray space. And so candidates, right now, the Democratic Party is solidly based around a core set of ideals. But there's nuance that exists amongst the population that want to talk about maybe transgender individuals in sports, or maybe want to talk about the deficit or excess spending or excess taxation. There are individuals that identify with the Democratic Party that want to talk more about freedom but are afraid to look at how far the other side has gone. Same with the Republican Party. There are people within the Republican Party that feel that republicanism has gotten too extreme in a pushback with Trumpism or with the candidates that come out of the Massachusetts primaries. And so this gives more candidates the opportunity to be nuanced about the kinds of leaders that they would be should they get elected.
All right. I guess I can get that. Would, let's say, on the primary ballot, I guess it's different, but let's start with the primary ballot. Would the primary ballot be any different? So in other words, the Republicans have their primary ballot. Would that be ranked choice, or would that just be the top vote getter makes it? Same with the Democrats.
Well, there's some laws and there's some private rules that are followed for each. You have the Massachusetts primary process, which exists, but you also have conventions, the nominating conventions that exist. And so parties themselves are not under the same jurisdiction as Massachusetts law. They have their own committees, state committees, and they can change their rules at any time. Whereas the primary process is very is a little more. I wouldn't say. I would say it leans towards a straw poll. But the people who turn out for primaries are usually the most devout of their party, and not necessarily this unenrolled 60%. Although in Massachusetts, we are fortunate enough to be able to go and pick our ballot that day. But wouldn't it be nice if you walked in and got to rank the candidates? So
So how would I? Okay, I don't know if it would or wouldn't. I would. I'm still in that camp that says I'm part of the majority that voted against it in 2020. I can see where it might help one of my Liberty Alliance candidates, but I guess I still have the big question mark.
Yeah, I think Republicans in the last referendum for ranked choice voting were a little bit gun shy about pulling the trigger on ranked choice voting.
Why would they want it?
Exactly. Why would they want it? Because their claim is that Massachusetts is so liberal that the only candidates that would be on the ballot and selected would be the most progressive.
Okay, so let's take that. All right. Great thing. Tara DeSisto is our guest. We're talking ranked choice voting. If you'd like to climb in on this, 508-996-0500. All right. You just brought up a great scenario, Tara. Walk us through that scenario.
Okay, so should the candidates that run on the Republican primary ballot enact ranked choice voting, what you would likely get is a more centrist view of Republicanism and not a radical view of Republicanism or a Trumpian view of Republicanism as we are looking at the extreme pillars.
I hear that. Can you map it out just a little for me? Because what I guess what you're saying is if you're of another party and you like what the other party person is saying, I'm going to vote for that person instead of voting for the Republican? So
let's take it through the primary. If they were to take it on during the primary and you had Charlie Baker listed as candidate number 1, Jeff Deal as candidate number 2, John Kingston as candidate number 3, Beth Lindstrom as candidate number 4. I'm just throwing names of individuals who have run for statewide office. Anthony Amore, you can put him on there as number 5. You can then choose, well, I really like Charlie Baker, so I will vote for him first. I'm okay. Beth Lindstrom's been in the party for a long time. She's done a lot of work. I would say that she would be my second choice. I really like Anthony Amore. He's done a lot in Massachusetts and really stepped up and run. So you'd mark him as your third choice. And you leave the other 2 candidates off because you don't really know anything about John Kingston, and Jeff Deal's gone a little too far for you. So what happens is when those votes are aggregated and tallied up, someone needs to hit 50% in order to win. If no one makes 50% in the first round of aggregation, they eliminate the lowest turnout candidate, and those second choice votes then get tallied in. So what you have is a population who has played more of a role in selecting the kinds of candidates that they want to see represented. Does that make sense to you, Brian?
That does make sense. What I'm a little puzzled on is you're telling me I would vote for the candidate that I want. I don't see how that keeps me from voting for the candidate I think will win.
So you can vote however you want, whether or not you choose to vote for the candidate that you think will win. This also gives you the freedom to vote for candidates that you align further with.
All right, we'll come back. I want to take a call. 508-996-0500. I'm feeling it. I'm just not quite sure though. Hello, you're on with our guest, Tara DeSisto.
Hello, thanks for having such a good guest on. Now, I wonder if your guest, what's your first name?
Tara.
Okay. What do you think of proportional representation? Because part of your argument is that there's logger jams between opposing parties, whereas in Europe they have plenty of proportional representations so that some seats are in the parliament, etc., to give voice to certain views, and sometimes alliances and compromises have to be made with different political groups to get something done. So what is your opinion of proportional representation?
I think when you have proportional representation, you take away from the democratic process of taking the whole population and really polling them on their opinions. If you mandate that a certain group is in leadership roles, you're not taking into account any changes in the ideology of the population as it grows over time. I'm not sure if it would align with our Constitution in Massachusetts here. I'd have to really look into that.
Well, it seems that it would allow more democratic voices and input as it does in Europe. They get, those in minority positions, they get to at least speak out and address the public in general and affect the polls, etc., on what the majority in control of the Congresses should do. So I don't see how it interferes with democracy. I think it matches what you're advocating and supplements it. But thanks for your opinion on it.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you calling in and asking the question. Proportional representation plays out differently in different places if you look at how it's used in other countries, such as Parliament or even in the Middle East. Lebanon has proportional representation, I know, as well. I do agree that there's a problem that there is not anyone representing the voice of Massachusetts in Congress at this time because we are a one-party state. And so I see why proportional representation would sound very appealing. But again, it's not necessarily the will of the people. And that's what I'm trying to drive home further to is where are we now? We are a changing, evolving society. And how can we create a system that adapts with us as a population?
Very good. 508-996-0500 to get onto the program. So I vote Libertarian most of the time when there's a Libertarian candidate to vote for. Most people do not, and I think you know the story yourself. So how does this help me? Do I decide, all right, I'm going to still vote Libertarian as opposed to voting for the Republican or the Democrat or somebody else? How does that play?
So often candidates have to run one or two times to get the kind of name recognition and airtime that they need to identify with the voter populace. And so what this does is it allows the candidates that are outside of the two-party or outside of the down the road, down the line, tried and true Republicans or Democrats to really create a presence for themselves. If you are still putting your energy behind the top Republican candidate, you can still vote for, as a second choice, for the Libertarian candidate. Or you can vote for the Libertarian candidate and have your second choice be for the Republican candidate. So again, you don't feel like you're throwing your vote away and you're still participating in getting to that 50% approval rating of the voting population.
Tara, if this sounds as good as you're making it out, how come it failed in 2020? Is this one of those that people just don't recognize it? Or, as I like to say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it?
I think there's a lot of education that needs to take place on ranked choice voting. And I think Voter Choice Massachusetts did a lot of work on that. But I think maybe some of the more rural areas of Massachusetts may have been neglected and they really focused on the city participation. So I also think it goes back to the comment I made earlier about Republicans feeling like they will be completely eliminated from the conversation because the state is so progressive. But I think that is a fear and not necessarily something that would come to light. I think it would breathe oxygen for more libertarian, more right-leaning thinking to be able to occur in the public space.
You know, it's interesting to hear you say that, because Acushnet voted pretty heavily Republican during the 2024 election, and I know there are a couple of other cities and towns that did, but I don't know if it was all the Trump phenomena. There seemed to be more people voting that Republican way. I don't know how many of them were MAGA Republicans compared to more Charlie Baker centrists or Rhino Republicans.
I haven't dug deep into that, but I'm sure there was a Trump effect. We also had major challenges with the population of immigrants that we were absorbing. If you remember, we had Florida and Texas shipping migrants to our state, and we were housing them very abruptly. And that created a lot of chaos in our financial system. That created a lot of chaos in our neighborhoods. That impacts our school system, taking on those schools, taking on those children and how they will be affected. Dealing with issues that come with that population coming in. So I think people saw that happening, and there was some pushback towards that. And it's unfortunate that we can't have debates about that in a classy way, in a way that respects one another, and instead villainizes each other.
I hear you on that. I have a few more minutes, and I want to get a couple of other things in.
Sure.
One would be, you just brought up illegal immigrants, migrants, whatever title you want to give them. Is that going to be the number one issue as we go into 2026 here in the Commonwealth, not nationwide, but here at home?
I think the topic of sanctuary cities is going to be one. I think, ICE is very present. We're seeing both push and pull in that direction, and I think it will be. I think also the state legislature, the auditor came out, the state voted to audit the legislature, and they continue to push back on that. I think where the governor stands on that topic is going to be of interest to the voters of Massachusetts. We've been waiting a long time for it.
Yeah, the governor is going to stand which way the wind blows. That's the way I look at her. I'm glad you brought up the sanctuary part here. The Trump administration identifies Massachusetts as a sanctuary state. Governor Healy and company, they don't agree with that. In your opinion, is the Commonwealth a sanctuary state or not?
I think we have cities that have chosen to identify themselves as sanctuary. And what I've learned about that process is once a municipality chooses to adopt the title of sanctuary, that frees up funding in the municipal budget to attribute funds towards that specific cause, whether it be sanctuary for migrants or sanctuary for transgender individuals. That is the process of sanctuary that I understand. Why declaring yourself a sanctuary city is a valid effort. I would say that we have a state that has identified itself as a warm place for people to feel that we celebrate diversity and champion taking care of the most vulnerable populations.
Is this question that we're talking about right now, is it worthy of a ballot question to figure out how the people in the Commonwealth, take the temperature to figure out Do we want to be sanctuary? Do we not want to be sanctuary?
Well, the referendum process is a very long process, and so if you were to take that on, you'd have to word it in a way that was digestible for the population, and you'd have to get it in front of the Attorney General by the first Wednesday in August to find out if it's constitutional, the way that you want to display that to the voter. I think there's a lot of people that would be very interested in a question like that, and some people that think, maybe we just need to leave this up to the municipalities. I think deciding that you're a sanctuary city does put a target on your back for this particular administration to go after. But Massachusetts has been a bunch of fighters for a while. There is a reason why they call us Mass,
Yeah, I guess. Now going to definitely switch gears with you. Tara DeSisto is our guest. She is on the advisory board of the Rank Vote, but this is taking out a vote. Deals with the MBTA. You alerted me more than a year ago about MBTA commuter rail trains going way too fast through intersections. Has that changed?
Well, the rail system is governed federally, and the Northeast Quadrant in which we reside in, all of us reside in, the federal government has created the speed limit of 85 miles an hour for trains to run through. My concern is at the at-grade crossings that exist around the state, and that is where the rails meet the road and often pedestrian walkways as well. Trains are still allowed to run up to 85 miles an hour. The MBTA claims that they don't run faster than 70 miles an hour. And that is different for different times of day.
70 miles per hour is pretty fast if you're going through an intersection, let's say at Nash Road or Kings Highway. I know you don't know those particular intersections, but those are heavily trafficked intersections.
Yes, and the challenge is that when someone gets hit in those spaces, when there are accidents, they are automatically condemned as trespassing or attempting to take their own life, rather than look at the claim of safety concerns around the rails. The onus is on the pedestrian and the driver rather than the rail system. And that's
really?
a real...
I'm listening to this, and I'm a bit flabbergasted with all the different things that have been going on with the MBTA, and they still get first fiddle over the pedestrian.
Yeah, and oftentimes if there's dilapidated intersections of safety, there's a political football at play in those situations. Whose job is it to maintain the safety? Is it the Department of Transportation at the federal level? Is it Keolis? Is it the MBTA? Is it the state Department of Transportation? Is it the municipality? And everyone's holding their nose saying, not my job. And in those situations, nothing gets fixed.
People get killed.
People get killed. Yes, absolutely.
Tara, I want to thank you. Gotta go. It's been a very invigorating hour, to say the least. Listening to you talk about this even more. You've convinced me an inch more. I'm not quite sure if we had a vote on ranked choice voting coming up exactly how I would vote, but I'm more so than I was 2 weeks ago, and certainly more so than I was 5 years ago.
Well, there are municipalities that do have ranked choice voting enacted as of now, and I think that's what you'll see happening for the next couple of years, is municipalities taking it on individually and really testing out the theory. So thanks, Brian, for having...
No, thank you. So you think you're better off, let's say, at the city or town level than trying to get this one swoop with the state?
I do. But there are states like Maine and Alaska that have enacted ranked choice voting. And although the candidates sometimes feel that it's more difficult to poll, the populations that live in those states overwhelmingly are pleased with ranked choice voting. So much so that when the legislature took it away in Maine, the citizens pushed for it to become back as the process of voting. So I think the more people are educated about it, the more people will realize that it gives them more power than they had before with their single vote.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. Get back to your Saturday.
Such a pleasure.
All right. Tara DeSisto. She is on the advisory board of the Rank Vote. Interesting name that they have. All right. Hour number 2, going to talk about, we're going to kind of open it up, quite a few things to discuss, some Trumpian type stuff and other stuff that's been going on. And we got a little break to take and then come back and tell you what the temperature is. Welcome back. And again, thanks to Tara DeSisto for joining us on the show today, telling me, what did you think of the rank choice voting? And I did ask more or less a question of the day. We do have a quote different than the question. The Trump administration identifies the Commonwealth as a sanctuary state. And in fact, it's putting different communities on notice. Governor Healy says we are not a sanctuary state. I am asking you, is Massachusetts a sanctuary state, or, as Governor Healy says, we are not? Looks like I got another rat story for you, another rat story we'll get into during the next hour. Also, some things going on with these ICE raids that we are definitely going to look at when we get into hour number 2. ABC is getting ready to tell you what they want you